T9C got the fucking juice.
Silver's the new gold.
It takes a shit scene.
T9C got the fucking juice.
Silver's the new gold.
It takes a shit scene.
Yo, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of JT Sports Live. I'm your host, JT. We had a fantastic week of football. There was complete madness week one in the NFL. You had Cincinnati losing to the Patriots. The Jaguars choked against the Dolphins. In college football, Oregon had another close win against Boise State, an inferior opponent, where they were a multi-touchdown point favorite. And there's just been a lot of madness and chaos going on in college football in the NFL. And we got to dive into a lot of it on this episode. Bryce Young just completely looked god-awful against the New Orleans Saints. And I still refuse to believe that Bryce Young is a bust. I refuse to believe that somewhere inside of Bryce Young, the Alabama version of him is locked away. Like, it's somewhere in there. There is some dog in Bryce Young. Dave Canales just has to unlock it. There's an epidemic in the NFL going around of bad quarterback play. There were so many bad quarterbacks that I saw play in week one. I want to give my thoughts on it. What's the reasoning for it? With the Falcons losing to the Steelers, things could get really ugly really fast for Raheem Morris and that new regime down there in the ATL. What if they start 0-3? Do they make the change from Kirk Cousins to Micheal Penix? Deion Sanders, you know, as much as I believe in Coach Prime and I want to see him do big things with Colorado's football program, the more I watch that team play under his coaching, the more I start to question just how qualified is Deion Sanders to be a head coach at the Power 4 level. USC, can they win the Big Ten this year? Florida, if they decide to go in a different direction, they fire Billy Napier, should they bring back an old friend? And I was wrong about Arkansas. This team is better than I thought. they could be a 7-8 win team potentially. And I want to give my concerns about Oregon so far this season. They've had close calls, barely beating Boise State. They beat Idaho by 10 despite being nearly a 50-point favorite in that matchup. Is this Oregon team as good as what people thought they would be this year? Before we dive into it all, make sure that you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Remember that we aren't just a YouTube channel, we are a podcast. You can find this episode on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from. The JT Sports Podcast is available. Give us a 5-star review if you enjoy. If you got any questions or topics that you would like discussed on a future episode, you can send them in the DMs on Instagram at JTSports_ and on X at JTSports__. Shout out to everybody that's tuned in on YouTube, X. Before we dive into it, here's a quick word from our sponsor, Aura. In football, we all know that no quarterback can win without good protection up front. It's also important that you protect yourself from data brokers who sell your personal information online to scammers, spammers, and anybody else who may want to target you. That's why you should use Aura, today's sponsor of this episode. Aura shows which data brokers are passing away your information on the internet and automatically submits opt-out requests on your behalf. Go to aura.com/JTSports in description or pin comment down below to get a 14-day free trial and protect your personal information from being exposed online. Cleaning up your information online not only helps reduce the amount of spam you receive, but it also protects you from hackers who could use this info to help gain access into your social media accounts, bank accounts, or other sensitive information. Go to our sponsor, aura.com/JTSports in description or pin comment down below to gain access to your 14-day free trial and protect yourself from hackers looking to gain access into your sensitive information online. All right, everyone, let's dive into it. Bryce Young in his first start that over. Bryce Young yesterday against the New Orleans Saints looked absolutely terrible. His first pass was an interception, and the whole entire afternoon, I was just asking myself, like, is Bryce Young really this bad? Because there's no way I can possibly be watching the same quarterback that carried Alabama the 2 years he was there right now with the Carolina Panthers. I refuse to believe that Bryce Young is this bad. And yes, I still have faith that Bryce Young can become a really good quarterback at the NFL level. And there's dog inside of Bryce Young. Okay, somewhere hidden inside of Bryce Young, the Alabama version of him is locked away. Dave Canales just has to find the key to be able to unlock it and get the best out of Bryce Young. You see, when Bryce was coming out of Alabama, I really thought that there was no way he was going to be a bust in the NFL. Despite the limitations that he has with his size, he's dominated at the high school level, the collegiate level, and please don't lecture me about, it's the NFL, JT. There's a difference between playing in college football and playing in the NFL. I understand that. But there were things that Bryce Young did incredibly well at Alabama, such as having good pocket movement, great accuracy outside of the numbers and inside of the numbers, and a lot of things that made Bryce Young so special at Alabama, we haven't seen so far throughout his career with the Carolina Panthers. You can blame the dysfunctional ownership. You can blame the terrible coaching that he received in year one. But in his second season, having a new supporting cast, Deontay Johnson, some better running backs, you got a new head coach in Dave Canales that I think is pretty good. This was the same guy who was responsible for resurrecting Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield in back-to-back seasons. If you can resurrect the careers of those two QBs, you can do the same thing for Bryce Young. At this point, there has to be a serious conversation about Bryce Young and how the Panthers went about evaluating this dude coming out of Alabama, because for some reason he's just not a good fit with this organization. And I just can't understand why. Because in the SEC, that's where the majority of college football's best players reside. The SEC has more players drafted in the NFL yearly than any other conference in college football. So it's not like Bryce Young was playing against scrubs. In the SEC championship, he torched the Georgia defense that had Jalen Carter and numerous other future NFL starters on that team. Okay? And the Alabama team that Bryce Young played with wasn't as good as what you typically see out of an Alabama team. For the people that don't watch college football like that and make it seem like Bryce Young was overrated when he was coming out of the draft really frustrate me, because if you really watched the 2 seasons that Bryce Young was the starter for Alabama, those years, Alabama wasn't that good. They only had 2 first-rounders that Bryce Young played with, that being Jahmyr Gibbs and Jamison Williams. Other than that, his offensive line wasn't good. The majority of the defenses that Nick Saban was throwing out there weren't as good as what they've been in the past. And when Bryce Young left for the draft, Nick Saban fired his entire coaching staff. He said that we were too Bryce Young dependent, and he changed his philosophy. That's how much Bryce Young meant to Alabama's football program at that time. And I just can't wrap my head around Bryce Young just being this bad as an NFL quarterback. You know, I've been evaluating and scouting players for over the last 5 to 6 years, and no player has surprised me more than Bryce Young with how disappointing he's been in the NFL up to this point of his career. And I'm not about to write him off just because he had a bad week 1 against New Orleans. Listen, in week one, there's a lot of weirdness that goes on. You got guys who are rusty because they saw limited action in the preseason, or they weren't able to get a lot of timing and chemistry built and down packed with the receivers and their offensive line during training camp in the preseason. And sometimes growth doesn't always take place during the offseason. Sometimes a player grows throughout the season. And I'm willing to give Bryce Young until the second week of December to finally come to the realization of what he is. Because after Thanksgiving is when the best teams play their best football, and the best players also play their best ball as well. And it's too early into the year with the new head coach, a new supporting cast, just to say Bryce Young is a flat-out bust. He's not good. So if you're coming on here expecting me to give up on Bryce Young, you got to keep waiting some more, because I'm a really patient person, because I understand that football is a game that is not about how you start, it's about how you finish. Jordan Love struggled for the majority of last season, but he played his best football the last 2 months of the year when it mattered the most. That's when you want to see your franchise quarterback start to solidify themselves as the future of your franchise. It's too early to come to an assumption of what Bryce Young is when there still is so much football to be played. Around week 13 or week 14 is when we are actually going to have a better understanding of if Bryce Young is a bust, or if this dude actually has the capability to play the quarterback position at a high level for the Panthers franchise. I've been watching the Carolina Panthers for a lot of years. I'm not a fan of this team, but I might as well be with how much Panthers football I watch. And I'm going to be honest, I was really disappointed in how Bryce Young and the rest of this team played against the New Orleans Saints. I was excited for week 1 of this NFL season. And when I woke up Sunday morning I was so excited to watch Bryce Young play because I was optimistic that with Dave Canales and having Deontay Johnson, Xavier Legette, and the other new weapons that they gave him, that would be enough to help him improve. But we didn't see any improvement at all. If anything, he looked worse than what he did last year. But I still believe that Bryce Young has that dog inside of him, and the version of him that we saw at Alabama is locked inside of him somewhere, and Dave Canales just has to find the keys to be able to pop that lock and get Bryce Young playing at his highest level possible. So I'm not willing to write off Bryce Young yet. You know, there still is a lot of games to be played. Things aren't going to get any easier for Carolina. They got to play the LA Chargers in week 2. That could be another game where we see Bryce Young struggle, but progress doesn't always happen overnight. Okay, sometimes it takes a little bit of time for a quarterback to develop and improve in their second season. I'm not making any excuses for Bryce. All I'm saying is that I'm waiting to see more out of him this year under Dave Canales before I finally give you a verdict on if this dude is a bum and he was a wasted pick, or if there is something there with him. And from what I saw out of him at Alabama, I just can't give up on him too easy, man. The only time Alabama lost with Bryce Young as their starter was when he was off the field. He didn't have an opportunity to win the game because the opposing team didn't give him a chance to get the ball in his hands. That's how good he was. He arguably is the most talented quarterback that Nick Saban has ever had. I just can't ignore what I saw at Alabama, him playing at that high of a level, and just write him off this early. Like, there definitely is something inside of Bryce Young that has to be unlocked. Okay, I just can't accept what Bryce Young is right now because I never would have thought he would be this bad in the NFL. And I'm pretty good when it comes to player evaluation and scouting. Go ahead and check my rap sheet. You know, I had Tank Dell and Zay Flowers as my top 2 receivers in last year's draft class. If I was the Patriots general manager right now, they would have a Super Bowl team at this moment. So I'm pretty confident that Dave Canales is going to be able to get the most out of Bryce Young. It's just going to take some time. How long is it going to take? I give it until the second week of December to find out. Shout out to everybody that's tuned in. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel. Remember to hit that bell icon so you don't miss when we go live, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss new episodes. If you're listening on X, make sure you give us a follow, retweet the stream with your friends, family members, and acquaintances. So, the other day when I was watching all of these Week 1 NFL games, I saw a lot of bad quarterback play. And there's an epidemic of bad quarterback play going around in the NFL for over the last 2-3 years. You know, yesterday, Bryce Young, Will Levis, Daniel Jones, Deshaun Watson all looked garbage. And the reasoning for why the quarterback play in the NFL has been so bad over these last couple of years is, for one, a lot of these dudes who are starting in Week 1 don't really get a lot of reps throughout the preseason, because ever since Sean McVay came into the league and he started not playing his starters in the preseason, a lot of the rest of the teams in the league have followed suit with that same strategy. And when you don't get any snaps in the preseason, yes, it minimizes the chances that one of your star players gets injured before the season starts, but there's also a high chance that said quarterback play that didn't play none in the preseason ends up looking rusty to start Week 1. Like you saw out of Joe Burrow against the New England Patriots this year, and last year in his Week 1 opener, he wasn't that good. That's because he didn't get a lot of action in the preseason. And football is a sport where you can't just not play it for 6-7 months and then pick up for where you left off because of how fast the game is and the physicality of it. It's one of those things where you need as much repetition as possible so you can get acclimated to the speed of the game when you end up getting real in-game action in the regular season. It's one of those things where when you take a break from it, it takes a little bit of time to get back into the flow of things. It's like when you graduate from high school and you take a year off before going to college. When you go to college a year removed from graduating high school, it's a little bit of an adjustment period because you got to get back into the flow of doing homework, doing assignments every single night, writing a lot of essays, making sure that you go to sleep so you can wake up earlier enough to make sure that you attend your classes. And that's what the NFL is like. When you take a few months off and you don't have any real in-game action, you can be rusty if you don't play in the preseason. Another reason for why the quarterback play has kind of been bad in the NFL over these last couple of years has been the amount of injuries that we've seen at the quarterback position. There have been over 50 million backups playing QB1 for several teams due to the amount of injuries we've seen star quarterbacks sustain. Last year at the New York Jets, Aaron Rodgers got injured his first 3 plays into his Jets career. You have to start Zach Wilson, Tim Boyle. With the amount of injuries these starting quarterbacks are sustaining, you're seeing more backups have to come in, and a lot of these backups aren't good enough to cut it in today's NFL because some of these dudes who played in college, they played in a RPO system, run pass option, which means that a lot of the things they did was based off how the defense was aligned. So if you got a lot of guys in the box, you will have the option just to pass the football for a quick screen or a quick check down. But if there were guys stacking, well, if there were guys not stacking the box and you had a light box and you got the ability to run it, then you would just choose to run the football instead. And a lot more rookie quarterbacks have to be inserted into these kinds of situations where they don't have the luxury of being able to sit behind the vet and learn. Same thing goes for these rookie quarterbacks that end up looking like solid backup options in the preseason. Then the regular season rolls around and they're not comparable starters. Last year, we had Dorian Thompson-Robinson, who was the prime example of this. He balled out for the Browns during the preseason. Deshaun Watson got injured, and you were confident that DTR was going to be able to take over and maybe be the quarterback of the future for the Browns. But when he ended up going in against Baltimore, he didn't look good at all. And a large reason for that is because he wasn't prepared to run the NFL-style offense when he was playing college football at UCLA. It's never been easier to make the transition from college to pro due to the amount of influence that the NFL has taken from the college game, more designed quarterback runs, more spread offenses with 3-4 wide receiver sets. But at the same time, there are still a lot of things that you do in college that you never do in the NFL, such as how you get the play calls. And in the NFL, you huddle nearly every snap other than when you're running a no-huddle offense with 2 minutes left in the game before halftime. So for a guy like DTR or Caleb Williams, you come into the league, a guy like DTR is expected to be a backup. He actually gets the opportunity to come in, and he's looking like a deer in headlights out there because the NFL game is just too fast for him. It's hard for him to process. It's hard for him to get the play calls in because he never played with this amount of speed at the collegiate level. The terminology is way more advanced. In college, your plays are only about 2-3 words. In the NFL, your plays are a sentence long. You got plays like XYZ, cut, split, zip, banana. It's a lot to learn. And the quarterback play has kind of been watered down due to how easy it's been to play QB at the college level with the amount of offenses that are RPO based and quarterbacks don't have to go through their progressions. It doesn't really prepare these quarterbacks, these new generation quarterbacks, for what's in store once they get to the National Football League. Look at how Caleb Williams played against the Tennessee Titans. I mean, he was awful. This was not what I was expecting out of the first pick of the NFL draft. This dude has been getting compared to Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, prime Russell Wilson. I was not expecting him to struggle, regardless of if rookie quarterbacks have losing records in the first week of the season. You expect much better quarterback play out of Caleb Williams. So there's just been an epidemic of bad quarterback play going on in the NFL. And the two biggest reasons I believe for this are due to the lack of snaps that these starters are getting in the preseason. And two, you got more backup quarterbacks coming in that didn't really have that much experience running an NFL level offense. That's why they struggle to make the adjustment. And when they end up being able to get the starting nine for a guy that gets injured, most of the times they are not ready, or either you got these rookie quarterbacks that are starting faster than what they should be. Back in the 90s and the early 2000s, when you drafted a dude in the first round, most of the times you didn't start them. You let them sit behind the vet for a year, let them learn, get a little bit more acclimated to the speed of the game in the playbook, and they ended up starting their second seasons. Or if you were to start a young rookie quarterback, you didn't have high expectations for that season. That season was solely based for that quarterback to develop. Like Peyton Manning's rookie season, the Colts weren't expecting to be a playoff team with him. They knew that there was going to be a lot of growing pains with them, which is why they had watered down expectations. But these rookie QBs now, like Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams, everybody's expecting the world out of them. They're expecting them to change their franchise overnight, like what CJ Stroud has done with the Houston Texans. And, you know, there's just been an epidemic of awful quarterback play, even for guys that have been playing in the league for a while. Deshaun Watson, for as long as he's been in the NFL, he shouldn't be that bad. Even with him having a shoulder injury that sidelined him for the majority of last year, I expect better quarterback play out of a guy like him. He's a vet in this league. He knows what it takes to win. He's played at an elite level before. I don't understand why this dude has just fallen off as bad as what he has in Cleveland. Maybe the Browns just have a curse where whoever they get to be their starting quarterback, they only end up being good for a season or two, or just bad overall, and they will never get good quarterback play for some reason. I don't know, but it's just the quarterback play I've been seeing in the NFL. I don't know how many of you guys feel this way, but it's been pretty bad. The Atlanta Falcons, I believe they could be in a lot of trouble over the next couple of weeks. They start out 0-1 to the Pittsburgh Steelers, which was a game I believe they had to win, because their next two games, they're playing the Philadelphia Eagles and the Kansas City Chiefs. Kirk Cousins didn't look too hot in his Falcons debut. He had a couple of interceptions. He made some bad decisions with the football. He had some really bad misses. And if the Falcons start 0-3, we're going to come to a situation where we legitimately could see Kirk Cousins get benched very fast for Micheal Penix. Remember, this is Raheem Morris' second opportunity being a head coach in the NFL. And the first time he was the head coach for the Buccaneers, he failed mostly because he didn't have competent quarterback play. Now, with this being his second job, I'm pretty sure that if there's any signs that Kirk Cousins isn't the guy that he looked like last year before his injury, Raheem Morris is probably going to just cut bait and say, you know what, let's just go ahead and throw Micheal Penix out there. I believe that the Falcons drafted Micheal Penix not to just be their quarterback of the future, but to be their insurance policy just in case the Kirk Cousins signing didn't work out. There were some issues about how good was Kirk going to be, not just coming off that Achilles injury at his age, but he didn't get any snaps in the preseason. So he still is fairly new to this offense, new to his teammates, and it's going to take a while for him to get comfortable with the guys around him before he ends up playing at a competent level. And with him probably struggling these next couple of weeks due to rust, you wonder how patient are the Falcons going to be with waiting on Kirk Cousins to bounce back to form. What if this dude never bounces back? What if he just has fallen off due to father time, getting him with old age, and that Achilles injury setting him back as well? He's not the same player that he was prior to sustaining that injury. I really believe that if the Falcons start 0-3, it's going to be a lot of chaos going on in that organization because you paid a lot of money to a quarterback that's not playing at the level that you expected, and you invested a top 10 pick into a quarterback that most of us presume is to be pro-ready right now. Micheal Penix, if he was playing for the Raiders at this moment, he'll be their starting quarterback. So when you got a rookie quarterback that's this good sitting on the bench, you don't have a long leash if you're a guy like Kirk Cousins, especially when you got a guy, Raheem Morris, where there is a lot of pressure on him to get Atlanta into the postseason this year. If he ends up underachieving and Atlanta has an 8-9 record, they don't win this division, they miss out on the playoffs once again, he could get fired after this season. I think that's a fireable offense. Atlanta has enough talent where they should be a lock to make it into the playoffs. When they go out and trade for Matt Judon, they sign Justin Simmons, those are moves that you make because you believe that the iron's hot, you have everything you need to make a playoff push. And if that doesn't happen, this fan base is going to be upset. This owner is going to be upset because he's been hearing that, we got to rebuild for a while. He wants to win now. And you hire Raheem Morris over Bill Belichick. If you have Bill Belichick, do you lose to the Steelers in the fashion that you did? Would you have the quarterback situation going on that you currently have? There's a difference between hiring a guy that's never won a Super Bowl before, that failed at his previous job, over a guy that's a multiple-time Super Bowl champion. Bill Belichick, as inept as what he is when it comes to assembling a competent offense, he's good with the defense, and if you give him an already tailor-made team where he doesn't really have to make too many personnel tweaks to it, he can get you to the postseason. So the pressure is on for Raheem Morris, and if Atlanta does end up losing their first 3 games of this year, you already lost to Pittsburgh. If you lose to Philly next week and Kansas City the following week after, you got to look at Kirk Cousins. And if he isn't playing well in those games, if you're Raheem Morris, I really think you have that conversation. You say, you know what, bro, I don't really have enough time to sit here and wait for you to play better. We're just finna go ahead, bench you, and start Micheal Penix, bro. If you want to get traded, we got no problem trading you to another team that wants you, because I'm pretty confident the Raiders and the Giants would take Kirk Cousins with his contract in a heartbeat with how bad their quarterback situations are right now. It's just, I couldn't imagine Kirk Cousins being the starter in Atlanta if they start out 0-3 for much longer. This is a team that is built to win. Their owner expects to win. This fan base expects to win. Hell, they expect to win. So if you start 0-3, it's a major disappointment for a team that has so much optimism and so much hope going into this year to start out so slow and sluggish. So Kirk Cousins has to put it together pretty fast. He has to figure things out, or if not, I really believe we see a world where he ends up getting benched. After watching Colorado get stomped by Nebraska, they exposed some pretty big problems with Colorado's football program. And the biggest problem that the Cornhuskers exposed is that Coach Prime may be in over his head. The more I watch Colorado, the more I see the flaws with the coaching. This offensive line is bad. The guys that they probably got out of the transfer portal may not be better than the guys they had starting last year. But how much of that is due to the guys up front just being trash? And how much of that is due to poor coaching? Jordan Seaton was a 5-star recruit. He was the best offensive tackle coming out of last year's recruiting class. I refuse to believe that he's as bad as what Colorado had at left tackle last year. And you got to wonder if Deion Sanders is holding back the development of a lot of these players because he's only caring about who can play the best without having to receive as much coaching. And he's only worried about making Shedeur Sanders and Shiloh look good as possible. This team doesn't look like a team. Nebraska looks like a team. You see the passion that they play with for each other. They play for Matt Rule. They play hard every single play. Colorado, the first 4 possessions that they had the ball offensively against Nebraska, I'm going to be honest. I thought I was watching Bishop Sycamore out there. I thought I was watching a junior varsity high school team out there with how bad Colorado looked offensively in the first quarter of this game. They finished with negative 23 rushing yards after the first quarter. As bad as what that offensive line is, I don't think it's all on these players not being good. I think a lot of it is on the coaching. And when you talk about Colorado football, a mass majority of people that follow Colorado mainly follow because of Deion Sanders. And a lot of you folks who think that me criticizing Deion Sanders, saying that he may not be qualified to be a head coach at this level, are going to perceive this as hating. It's not hating, and let me break it down to you why it's not. When you take over a job at a school like Colorado, who only won 1 game before you got there, everybody that has a general understanding of how college football works knows that it's not going to be an overnight rebuild. We knew that Colorado wasn't going to go from 1 win to being a national champion in the span of 1 season. But at the same time, though, there were certain games and certain situations where you watch Colorado play where they got questionable clock management, the scheme doesn't look that good, and they refuse to make changes when they continue to get outclassed up front. The definition of what it means to be ignorant means having no understanding of something, right? But the definition of insanity is to do the same thing and get the same results without making any changes. And when I see how bad Colorado's offensive line is, and they continue to go 3 and 4 wide, not leave a tight end or running back there to block, or not give Shedeur Sanders extra protection, it's insanity. And you got to look at the coaching staff. Why do you continue to do the same thing, get the same results, and not make any changes? When you have a guy like Jordan Seaton, that's a 5-star recruit, the best offensive tackle out of his class that's struggling out there, that's on coaching. And I think what Deion's problem is that he feels if he gets better players, he'll have a better team. But part of having a better team is helping these players grow, developing these players not just as good young men, but great football players. And too many people that just follow Colorado because they love Deion Sanders, they don't have an understanding of what a good, well-coached football team looks like. You're going off this narrative that it's Deion Sanders, and because it's Deion Sanders, we shouldn't criticize him because this is a black king that's successful. He gets a lot of hate because people hate who he was as a player. And now people are taking this opportunity with him struggling as a head coach to use it to pile on. But this is not that kind of situation. You know, you got to watch Colorado play and understand that part of having a good team is that you got to be well coached. You see, for my viewers out there that are casuals, and I'm not saying that in the meaning way, but if you're a casual football fan and you're somebody that only watches Colorado because you want to support Deion, the importance of a good head coach is the equivalent to being a good chess player. The better the chess player, the better they are at moving their pawns to better win the game. If you got a good head coach, he can take his players and put them in positions that maximizes their abilities and helps them reach their full potential because he puts them in the scheme or runs plays that maximizes their talents. A bad chess player goes about moving his pawns in a way that loses him the game because he's not strategic with it. He doesn't have a good understanding of how to win the game. All he's doing is just moving pawns around, trying to take the player that he's playing chess pieces without understanding strategies to better get those pieces, if that makes sense. With Deion, it seems like how he's running Colorado football is that, oh, I just got to hit the transfer portal. I just need to get better players instead of trying to help these guys grow as players. I respect the message that he's sending to these young men that, it's more than just football than just being football players. You got to be committed in the classroom. You got to come to practice on time, which is 15 minutes before it starts. He's teaching them how to be professionals, and that's respectable. I love the speeches that he gives them after the games about life, but eventually we got to get past the motivational speeches. It takes more than giving out good motivational speeches to be a head coach. Are you making adjustments? Are you putting your chess pieces in the proper position to have success? And I can't say Deion is doing that. And I really believe that Deion Sanders is in over his head as the head coach of Colorado. The more you watch this team play, the more you can't deny that Deion doesn't look like he knows what he's doing out there. I mean, for crying out loud, before halftime, Colorado was trying to score. They were trying to get a field goal on the board. He had 20-something seconds left on the clock. Why would you wait until you get the 11 seconds to call a timeout? Why not just call a timeout as soon as the play is over? When you got bad clock management, you have an offensive line that continues to get dominated up front week after week. Those are coaching issues. That shows you that Deion isn't a good coach. I'm not saying he's a bad coach, but he definitely doesn't look like a good one right now. And at Jackson State, it's easy to win when you can just easily outpower and out-talent the level of competition at that level. Because FCS teams, especially HBCU teams, have a hard time being able to recruit the amount of talent that Deion was getting at Jackson State. But now with him coaching at this high of a level, coaching in a Power 4 conference, you can't just win games based off having talented players like Deion Sanders and Travis Hunter and Jordan Seaton. You actually have to be able to develop those guys and put them in positions to succeed, which is what it takes to be a good head coach. You got to be able to adapt. You got to be able to make adjustments. And Deion doesn't have the ability to do that. And right now, it just looks like Colorado, the more you watch them play, the less they look like a good and well-coached football team. This looks like one of the worst teams in the Power 4. You barely beat North Dakota State, and then you got outclassed, outcoached, and just dominated physically and mentally by a Nebraska team that looked more well-prepared than what you were. Deion was talking all this stuff about how their defense was going to get after Dylan Raiola. He was going to struggle. They were going to blitz him all afternoon, right? They were talking about when Nebraska's defensive coordinator was saying what their game plan was. Deion and Shedeur came out and said there isn't a single defense that Shedeur hasn't seen, and whatever Nebraska's DC throws at him, he's going to have answers for him. Well, they didn't have any answers. Nebraska steamrolled those boys, and I promise to God, right hand on the Bible, after the first quarter, I really thought that Nebraska was going to beat Colorado 70-0. And I was really disappointed in the performance I saw on the field out of Colorado, because I expected more out of that team with Deion Sanders being the head coach. A lot of y'all think that I'm criticizing Deion Sanders because I don't like him, where if you look at my content, all I've done is just, if anything, overhyped and overrated this team. If there's anybody that believes in Colorado, it's me. You won't find too many people that are as bought in to Coach Prime down there in Boulder as what I am. But at the same time, I'm a realist. And I also have the ability to, get new information and change my opinion along the way. And I'm slowly starting to change my opinion towards Colorado football, because I'm now starting to realize week after week, the more I watch this team play, Coach Prime is not a good coach. He's a good marketer. He's a good promoter. But as far as the X's and O's, the Jimmies and Joes, I don't see it with this team. And you can't tell me I'm wrong when you get the results that you got against Nebraska. when you lost games that you should have won last year against Stanford, when you blew a 10-point lead going into the fourth quarter last year against Arizona. You know, some of the reasons for why Colorado is where they're at has nothing to do with talent and everything to do with coaching. Kalen DeBoer went to a national championship last year at Washington. In the span of 2 years, he turned that program around. That's what a great coach is. A great coach is a great chess player. And Deion isn't a great chess player. Deion's mentality is, let me just get a bunch of kings and queens. And if I get a bunch of kings and queens, I can easily win the game of chess. And that's not what being a good coach is. You know, as much as you can scream at guys, we got to do better. How about we hold the coaches accountable? How about we pull Pat Shurmur aside and say, hey, man, we got to change something. We can't keep going 3 and 4 wide and keep allowing our offensive line to get dominated like this. Can we give the brothers some help? Can we change the blocking schemes? Like, has Colorado even thought about changing their blocking schemes? How about utilizing some more motion? How about giving Dallin Hayden more touches? When Dan Lanning last year said that they're playing for clicks, we're playing for wins, this game isn't going to be played in Hollywood, he got a lot of pushback from that, from a lot of Colorado faithful. But as a fan of this program who really wants Deion to succeed, I really believe there was a lot of truth in what Dan Lanning said in that pregame speech. You know, like, I was really disappointed in what I saw out of Colorado against Nebraska, to the point where I really believe Deion Sanders owes Colorado fans, his players, and everybody else an apology for how bad they looked against Nebraska. Because there are people that are really invested into Colorado football that really believe in Deion Sanders, and he's letting a lot of people down with how inept the coaching looks. And it's tough to say that, but you know, I was watching that game really embarrassed. You know, and I was looking at myself like, damn, I had so many good things to say about this team just for them to come out and look like this. You know, you got people coming at me saying you don't know nothing about football when I'm more accurate than the majority of people on this platform. But Colorado makes the people that support this program and go to war defending Deion from guys like Paul Feinbaum look stupid. And it's kind of like spitting in their face when you play the way that you do against Nebraska, because I didn't see a well-coached football team. You know, I was really disappointed. And that's why I go at Deion so hard, because, you know, he talks a great game, but you got to be able to back it up. You know, and right now he's not walking the walk, as they say. He's talking that talk, but he's not backing it up. And I was just really disappointed. And I was a little bit sad with how things went against Nebraska. You know, I really was expecting a more competitive game. They didn't have to win, but at least go out there and show some fight. You feel me? Make some adjustments. And I just didn't see that. I just see a coach who cares about making sure that his quarterback is the star, making sure that he takes care of his favorites. And it doesn't seem like he's trying everything he can to develop a team. You just have a bunch of individuals, and that's what happens when you build a team through the transfer portal. Look how bad FSU looks right now. When I was talking to some of those players on the phone during spring break, I heard individuals. I didn't hear a team. You know, like, I didn't hear a team that was devastated off being left out of the playoffs. You know, I heard a team that was excited that they got to go down to Miami and have fun. They didn't really care about how bad they lost the game. You know, that's what happens when you get people from the portal. You don't build a team that way. You build a team by recruiting guys, having guys put blood, sweat, and tears for multiple years into your program. I'm just, you know, really disappointed with how things are turning out with the Deion Sanders experiment at Colorado. I expect more. This team doesn't look well coached. They don't look prepared in a lot of games that they play. It's just, we got Travis Hunter, Shedeur Sanders, and some good wide receivers. They're going to bail us out. And just with some of the coaches that Deion has been coached by, some of the greats, you would think that he's been around enough good coaches to know what it takes to be a good coach at that level. And right now, it looks like he's just not qualified to be a head coach in college football. If anything, he was better off staying at Jackson State, learning and growing as a head coach before he took a job of this high profile, of this magnitude. Shout out to everybody in the comment section. My guy Drawman says, yeah, it was not a good sign that Colorado lost to a team that beat them last season. He's learning what it takes to be a successful coach. Time will tell if he's cut out for it. My guy High Expectation says, facts, they going 5-7. My guy Keem Malik says, DJ Lagway greater than Ken Ward. Shout out to Michigan State Football Network. They got a big win against Maryland this past weekend. He says, yeah, Colorado ain't got it. It may come with time, but for now, Prime needs to take a step back from the spotlight till they get it together. Absolutely. Shout out to my guy, Cuban Damas. He says, what's up, JT? What's up? Hope everybody's doing well. Before we move on, smash that like button. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Listen to the podcast. You can find the audio version of this episode on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from. The JT Sports Podcast is available. There were a lot of doubters when it came to USC football going into this season. There were many media analysts out there saying how this team was going to be a dumpster fire. They might not even win 7-8 games. And with them getting out to a 2-0 start, they smashed Utah State as expected. They got a really good win against LSU. There's a lot of reasons to be optimistic about the trajectory of USC football and how good this team can be this season. And right now, I've talked to a good amount of people that bet a lot of money on, teams that can win the conference championship. They put a lot of money down on futures bets. And a lot of people keep asking me, JT, do you think USC can win the Big Ten this year? I believe they can. You got a great defense. You got Deion Lynn, who right now is proving to be probably the best defensive coordinator in all of college football. Remember, last year, in the span of 1 year at UCLA, he took that defense from being one of the worst in college football to being the top 15 unit. And look what he's doing so far at USC. You can't say, oh, this defense looks good because they're playing nobodies, when this defense was allowing teams like San Jose State to put up 20-plus points on them on offense. So this defense couldn't even stop below average opponents last year. So with how good and how improved USC looks defensively, it's not far-fetched to see this team at least making it to the Big Ten title game. Oregon, who was a lot of people's pick to not only win this conference, but win it all this year, they barely beat Boise State and Idaho. That's concerning. Those aren't just wins that you say, oh, yeah, it's going to get better with time. They got some fundamental problems on that offensive line and defensive line. USC, on the other hand, they're not struggling to beat teams that they're expected to beat. Against Utah State, they just outright just dominated those boys. Just completely blew them out of the freaking water. And Ohio State, we know of Ryan Day that he is one of the better coaches in college football. Overhated if you ask me, but there are certain games where he does get out coached by better coaches. And Lincoln Riley, we seem to have forgotten that last year was the worst season he ever had. 2023 was the only year that Lincoln Riley didn't have double-digit wins. He's been to the college football playoffs numerous times. He's developed several Heisman Trophy winners at quarterback, several first overall picks in the NFL. Lincoln Riley is one of the best overall coaches in college football. And we know that USC is always going to be good offensively with how good Lincoln Riley is with that side of football. The only problem has been fixed, and that's been the defense. And look at USC's schedule. Realistically, how many teams can you see them losing to this year? They play Michigan in 2 weeks. They're going to smash Michigan. Michigan's defense is good, but they don't have an offense. Now that USC has a defense, they could beat Michigan at home, the same way that Texas rolled Michigan in Ann Arbor. Wisconsin, Penn State, those are winnable games. Lincoln Riley is more trustworthy in big games than what James Franklin is. James Franklin has one of the worst records against top 25 teams among active FBS coaches. He's like 4-16 combined against Michigan and Ohio State. You can't trust little games James Franklin when he's going up against good teams. Maryland on the road, that's a win. Rutgers, Washington, those are winnable games. The toughest games that USC has to play this year are Nebraska and Notre Dame. You don't have to play Oregon. You don't have to play Ohio State. They got a pretty favorable path to get to the Big Ten championship. And let's say they do end up playing Oregon. With how Oregon has looked these first 2 weeks of this year, I would take USC to win. They look better defensively. We already know how good their offense is. If they were playing Ohio State, I would be 50-50. I probably would lean Ohio State, but I would leave that game alone from a betting standpoint out of the respect that I have for Lincoln Riley. He's won numerous Big 12 titles. You know, he's been to the college football playoffs before. He knows what it takes to build a good program and to sustain it. And right now, with the momentum that USC has, I would pick them to be in the Big Ten championship right now. As far as them being a playoff team, they definitely could be one of the teams to get in this year. I don't see them winning no less than 9 games. I said that before the season. I had them at 9-3. At best, they could be 10-2, maybe 11-1. You know, with how difficult this schedule is, it's hard to see them not having a bump or two along the road, but it's definitely manageable. I mean, you got to play Notre Dame at the end of this season. They lost to NIU. I don't trust Marcus Freeman in big games neither. So I'm really high on the Trojans as far as their chances of making it to the Big Ten title and being able to win the conference. Right now, if you put your bias aside and you just be honest, who have been the 2 best teams in the Big Ten right now? Ohio State and USC. And you can say that Ohio State hasn't played anybody, but Oregon hasn't played anybody as good as what they are, and they barely beat Boise State and Idaho. Penn State survived Bowling Green at home. Right now, you got to give credit where it's due, and Lincoln Riley's doing a phenomenal job at USC so far this season. And with the addition of Deanne Lynn, I really believe that was the missing piece to USC getting back on track and being the program we believe they could be when Lincoln Riley first took this job. His first year at USC, they won 11 games, and that was supposed to be a rebuilding year for them. That shows you how good of a coach this dude is. To me, he's the best coach in the Big Ten right now. I'll take him over Ryan Day and Dan Lanning and James Franklin in a heartbeat because he's proven more than what those coaches have. The only thing that Ryan Day has over Lincoln Riley is that he's been to a national championship. That's about it. But look at the program that he inherited from Urban Meyer. Just like how people talk about how Mark Stoops gave Lincoln Riley a tailor-made program at Oklahoma, you can say the same thing about Ryan Day at OSU. And I really think that Lincoln Riley has a better resume than Ryan Day because look at the amount of quarterbacks and the amount of players that he's gotten drafted into the NFL. He literally is quarterback U. There is no QBU as a school. QBU is Lincoln Riley. You want to get drafted to the NFL, you want to be the Heisman, you want to be a future number 1 overall pick, you go play for USC under Lincoln Riley's coaching. Now, Billy Napier's hot seat is scorching right now, and if they lose to Texas A&M and potentially suffer another crushing loss to another in-state foe, UCF, I'm pretty confident that Billy Napier is going to get fired. And if it happens, who should Florida bring in to replace him? There's been a lot of names thrown out there. Jedd Fisch, Rhett Lashley, the defensive coordinator from Georgia has been a hot name as well. But to me personally, if you have to once again find another head coach, why not go and bring back the head coach that gave your program the most success they've had in over 2 decades? That being Urban Meyer. Now, I've seen something that said that Urban Meyer will be interested in becoming Florida's interim head coach if they fire Billy Napier. To me personally, if you're going to let Urban Meyer be your interim head coach, you might as well allow him to be your permanent head coach. Florida needs a head coach that has a proven track record of being able to win and sustain success at an elite program in an elite conference. The SEC is no longer a conference where you can hire these guys from the G5 like Billy Napier and you can allow them to learn on the job. The SEC is home to the majority of college football's best coaches. You got Steve Sarkisian, Kalen DeBoer, Kirby Smart, Josh Heupel. There are so many good coaches in this conference where you don't have a lot of time to be learning on the job. And if Florida is ever going to be able to get back to the level that they used to be when they had Tim Tebow and Urban Meyer, you need to get a head coach that knows how to win. Not at the G5 level, but at a Power 4 level. And Urban Meyer, not only does he have experience winning, but he won a natty at Ohio State. He knows how to recruit. He already knows how to recruit Florida because he's not new to the location. And in the new era of college football with the transfer portal and name, image, and likeness, Urban Meyer could have more success than he's ever had being a head coach in college football at all. I mean, like at Ohio State, he probably was bending the rules a little bit. I'm not going to deny and make it seem like Urban Meyer probably wasn't already, paying players and whatnot. But now that it's legal, I'm pretty confident that Florida alumni, those boosters will be more than willing to donate to the NIL back and to help out a guy that they already know has won here before. And plus, if Urban Meyer is good at utilizing the NIL and the transfer portal, think about how fast he could quickly turn around Florida. They could be a contender as soon as tomorrow if they were to hire Urban Meyer. I know how he left Florida was a little bit scummy. He said that he had some medical issues, which is why he had to step away. And then a few years later, he ends up becoming the new head coach of Ohio State. I know that was a little bit weird. That's kind of like a slap in the face if you're a Florida fan. But it's not like Urban Meyer left the program on bad terms like Dan Mullen did, where his relationship between him and the athletic department and the AD soured over. Like, I think that Urban Meyer has a lot of good faith inside that Florida program. And I think that if you're them, you struggle to find his replacement. You might as well just go ahead and bring him back. He knows how to build a good coaching staff. You know that his teams are always well prepared. They don't have any undisciplined games where they're just having all kinds of stupid penalties and they have 13 men on the field. The play calling has never really been that big of an issue out of Urban Meyer neither. His offenses have always been pretty good. I mean, why not go ahead and bring back Urban Meyer if the dude is open to being your interim head coach? I don't see how he wouldn't be open to being your full-time head coach, especially if the money's right. If you're throwing $9-10 million at Urban Meyer, I don't see how he turns that down. And I don't really think that he's completely done with coaching. Like, he was willing to listen to the opportunity to become Texas' new head coach when they were doing their coaching search. And it's not like he's been out of coaching for a decade. The dude was just the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars like 2-3 years ago. So Urban Meyer, he has said that he's retired plenty of times and he's came out of retirement to take coaching jobs again. So I wouldn't see how Florida wouldn't be able to land him as their head coach as long as the money was right if he already wants to be their interim head coach. So I think bringing back Urban Meyer would be a great solution to Florida's inability to hire good head coaches. Why not go ahead and hire the head coach that's brought you the most success you've ever had as a program? Arkansas is a lot better than what I initially thought they were going to be this season. Now, although they recently lost to Oklahoma State, I was surprised that they were even up the big amount they were at that point during the game because I thought that they were going to lose that game. I didn't think they were going to get blown out, but I didn't think they had a chance of being able to even have a competitive game with Oklahoma State for the most part. And when you watch Arkansas offensively, they look really good. You got this new quarterback, Trent Green. This dude is a freak athlete. I heard about this dude when he was at Boise State last year. I heard more of him when I was always going against people online and College Football 25 who love abusing this dude. He has insane physical traits. He has a rocket forearm, and he's an insane athlete. And not only is he insane on the video game, but he's insane in person. I mean, this dude is damn near unstoppable when you watch him play. I mean, he's so big to the point where he's hard to bring down, especially when he gets a full head of steam. He's pretty accurate. I don't think he makes a lot of bad decisions with the football. Sometimes he gets in trouble when he just tries to force passes into tight windows because of how strong of an arm he has. And with Bobby Petrino being the offensive coordinator, you know, this dude is like Arkansas's golden boy. You bring back Bobby Petrino, everybody's going to be balled in. He has so much goodwill inside the Arkansas program, despite the reputation that he has among the majority of people in the world. A lot of people think Bobby Petrino is a scum, but you bring up Bobby Petrino to Arkansas fans, they make it seem like this guy is Jesus to their football program. And so far, you can understand why a lot of Razorbacks fans feel the way that they do about Bobby Petrino. I mean, this offense looks completely different than what it did last year. They are explosive. They can play complementary football. Not only are they good throwing the ball, but they also are good on the ground as well. And defensively, they have improved somewhat. You know, you got my guy, Jaheim Singletary, who I went to high school with. He recently came away with the big-time interception. Arkansas, they're not going to be a team that makes it to the playoffs out of nowhere, but they definitely are a team that I could see being a 6-8 win team at best this year, which I think is a huge overachievement for them, considering how low the bar was set going into this year based off how left things have gone for them the last 2 years. You lose KJ Jefferson, you replace him from a quarterback that nobody really knew too much of out of Boise State until the college football video game came out and until the season started. Now people are now starting to realize that, you know, Arkansas actually has some guys on offense. They can put up a lot of points with Bobby Petrino calling the plays. So for Arkansas, I got no problem admitting straight up that I was wrong about you guys. I thought that you guys were going to be a 3-win team. Sam Pittman was going to get fired around week 4, week 5, and that definitely still could happen. You know, maybe Oklahoma State just isn't that good as far as when they're going up against SEC teams. Once you get into conference play, that's when you really find out just how good you are. But for Arkansas, I got a good feeling that they could pull off a couple of upsets. Because when you can score points and you get good quarterback play and you got a good offensive coordinator, there's not too many games that you don't have a chance at being able to win. You know, you could go on the road and beat Auburn. You could definitely beat Texas A&M and College Station. Tennessee, LSU, you could win those games as well. Like, the only games Arkansas may not have a great chance at being able to win is when they're playing Ole Miss and Texas, but you get those teams at home. And we know that Arkansas fans show up to support this team. It's always a hostile environment when you got to travel to Fayetteville, Arkansas to play the Razorbacks. So this is a team that I was really wrong about, and I never underestimated their talent per se. It was more so that I didn't know how good Trenton Green was going to be, because when I watched him at Boise State, he was good, but he was inconsistent. He looked a lot like DJ Uiagalelei. But Bobby Petrino, the dude who helped Lamar Jackson win the Heisman Trophy at Louisville, if he was able to develop Lamar, he definitely could turn this Trent Green dude into an absolute stud, because all the physical ability is there and all the tools are there for him to literally take over college football. Like, Trent Green is definitely a name that you got to keep your eyes on, because if he continues this level of play that we've seen out of him these first couple of weeks, Arkansas is going to be a big surprise in the SEC this year. The last thing I want to talk about before we get up on out of here I got major concerns about Oregon football right now. Coming into this season, they were the second favorite team to win the Big Ten, right behind Ohio State. A lot of people, including Nick Saban, are picking them to win the national championship this year. And their first 2 weeks of this season have been really disappointing and really concerning. Week 1, you barely beat Idaho. You were a 48.5 point favorite going into that game. You only beat them by 10 points. And it's not like Idaho State is some juggernaut FCS program. As a matter of fact, I remember they used to be FBS, and then they had to move down to FCS. So you barely beat a team that got demoted from FBS to FCS. And then you say, okay, that's just week 1. You know, weird things happen. We're going to get it cleaned up against Boise State. And you barely beat Boise State. It took you to get a last-minute field goal to finish off Boise State. And Boise State, although they are one of the more well-respected G4, G5 programs out there, when you play Boise State, nobody looks at them as just an easy win. You know, people see the name Boise State and they're like, oh shit, you playing Boise State, you better look out for them. But even then, you have enough talent where you should be blowing out schools like Idaho. You should be blowing out schools like Boise State. And the Oregon teams that we've seen the past 2 years under Dan Lanning, we don't see the same this year. This, when you watch Oregon football, is that defense. That defense is not as good as what I thought it was going to be. And it's surprising because Dan Lanning comes from the Kirby Smart coaching tree. You would think that his defense would be up to snuff, especially with how good of a portal class he brought in. I mean, Oregon's leading donor pretty much pledged unlimited NIL money to them, where they have the ability to buy anybody they want to out of recruiting out of high school or in the transfer portal. So there's no excuse for Oregon to be struggling in the fashion that they have these past 2 weeks. And, you know, I don't even know if they're going to make it to the Big Ten championship. At this point, they may end up losing 3 games. If you can barely beat Idaho and Boise State, are you going to be able to beat Michigan? Are you going to be able to beat Ohio State? I don't know. Because you're not playing up to the level of talent that you have on your team. Oregon has one of the most talented teams in college football this year. This is a top 10 team or better from a talent standpoint. So therefore, you shouldn't be in close games and dogfights with a low-level FCS school in Idaho and Boise State. Regardless of how good those teams may be, it's no excuse when you're the juggernaut that Oregon is. You are recruiting as good as you've ever had. You're utilizing the portal better than you've ever had as well. There just is way too much talent, and people have way too much respect for Dan Lanning as a coach. Most people think he's a top 5, top 10 coach. So when you get this much praise, you expect better results than what you've been seeing out of the Ducks this year. You know, having a close game in week 1 is one thing, but having a close game with Boise State is a huge concern. Because regardless of how good Boise State may be this year, you shouldn't be in dogfights with them when you just completely out-roster them. And if your excuse is, well, JT, the games aren't always played on paper, then it's a coaching issue. Maybe people anointed Dan Lanning as the next great thing way too fast. You see, Oregon is one of those programs that for over the last couple of years, you keep asking yourself, when are they going to break through? If they ever break through. Because they more than have enough to win a national championship. They just haven't been able to get it done yet. You're looking for that right head coach to get you over the hump. If Dan Lanning gets that coach, you know, you definitely don't feel confident about it with how these past 2 weeks have gone for you. So I'm extremely concerned about Oregon. Their offensive line has looked really bad. They were giving up sacks against Idaho. They were giving up sacks against Boise State. And Dylan Gabriel isn't as good as what Bo Nix was. Maybe Bo Nix masked a lot of problems with Oregon football that we didn't really know about due to how good they were when Bo Nix was underneath center at quarterback. But now those issues are kind of starting to get exploited with how Oregon has looked these first 2 weeks. This is it for this episode of JT Sports Live. I appreciate everybody that tuned in. Shout out to my guy, Zero Cool. He says USC should be undefeated going into the conference championship. My guy, Drawman, says good point. I feel the same way about Arkansas. I think they will be in a lot of games, if for nothing more than their coach. I think his players will run through a brick wall for him. Absolutely. My guy, High Expectations, says DJ going to come to Miami next year. LOL. Shout out to everybody that tuned in. If you enjoyed this episode, do me a favor. Give us a 5-star review on Apple and Spotify. You can find us on all podcasting platforms. All you got to do is search the JT Sports Podcast, or you can go down to the description down below, and there will be the links to the Apple and Spotify versions of the podcast. If you have any questions that you would like me to answer on a future mailbag episode, you can send them in the DMs on Instagram at JT_Sports_ or on X at JT_Sports__.